Give me liberty and give me Annette.
Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where I talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. This podcast can be found on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, yada, yada, yada. And I'm Annette Bybee. I am your host. And I want to ask you all, if you haven't had a chance to go to YouTube and subscribe, it's a really good place for us to communicate with each other. Also, I'm on Facebook under Annette Talks as well. It's another good place to find me. And I am very excited about today's topic. We're going to be talking about Trump's peace plan for the Middle East. And I have been immersing myself in the Middle East over the last week or so. And so I have a little better handle on what's going on. But I brought in an expert because I am not an expert. And I wanted someone that could actually help us navigate through this discussion. So today we are joined by Samuel Lory. Hi, Samuel.
Hi, Annette, and hello to everybody. Thank you for having me.
And I got the name pronounced right?
You got it. You did great. Thank you.
All right. So I found you thanks to Jimmy Sangainberger. I probably mispronounced his name too, but you guys know each other over at the Millennial Policy Center, right?
Yeah. Jimmy and I have known each other for a number of years, and we work together at the Millennial Policy Center, which he heads up, and I'm a fellow with. So.
All right.
Yeah.
So you are a foreign affairs fellow over there, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And it's basically a think tank, isn't it, for millennials?
Yeah, it's a think tank where we're trying to reach millennials and also be a millennial voice to policymakers. And it's based on basically the values that your listeners subscribe to and that you espoused in the beginning. That's really what we believe in as well. So.
All right. And that's just I just picture a bunch of young guys.
Mostly.
That's great.
And we do have an advisory board of, more seasoned.
I knew you were going to go with seasoned. That's good. Yeah. I've seen some of your stuff. It's a really great website over there for anyone that wants to check it out. It's millennialpolicycenter.org, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this project, which we'll discuss, that's on the Millennial Policy Center website as well. So.
All right. I actually got a white paper off of there that I think you and Jimmy wrote together. And it's awesome. What's great about your white papers is that they're highly readable. And whenever I hear white paper, I think, oh my gosh, I'm going to get stuck in the weeds with something. But
Right.
Both times I've read white papers from MPC, been very readable, easy to follow, entertaining. So I recommend that listeners go there for more in-depth information about this. And then you are also a fellow in Israel and Middle Eastern Affairs at the Centennial Institute.
Correct, yeah, which is the think tank at Colorado Christian University and hosts the Western Conservative Summit every year. So I work over there with Jeff Hunt and the rest of Centennial Institute. So.
Oh, all right, awesome. So you're basically a conservative, deep thinker that happens to do a lot of thinking about the Middle East.
Correct, yeah, I love the Middle East, been over there 6 times, plan to continue traveling over there, and it's just a passion of mine. So
it's a fascinating area. I want to mention also that you have a bachelor's in international affairs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
As I've been reading about the situation over there and Trump's plan, I keep thinking back to what a professor said in my class back in the late 80s. Yeah, I just dated myself. I am not a millennial. But I was taking a class on the Middle East, and one of the first things he told us was, anyone that tells you that they understand the Middle East is either lying or crazy. And that has stuck with me all these decades. And I can kind of see that because I'm sure that even someone like you has spent all this time learning about it and working to develop policy and all this, probably still are surprised at things that happen over there, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it can be a very unpredictable place. It's very complex. I mean, there's many issues. And I mean, one other thing I wanted to mention as well, I did work work with Christians United for Israel for 3.5 years as a national field organizer, and we worked on a number of legislative policy initiatives on Capitol Hill. And when we'd go over to Israel, we'd meet with Knesset members and things like that. So yeah, I've been very steeped in just how complicated the region and especially policy making in the region can be. So yeah.
Awesome. It is fascinating, though. I can totally see just getting caught up in it. Because I'm like, I have to go read this paper, girls. I'm so excited. I have 3 daughters at home. And so, and just as an FYI for everyone, they're usually with their dad on Tuesday nights, but they are now downstairs. So I cannot be responsible for anything that happens. I've sworn them to stay down there, but if something bizarre happens, that's what's going on. All right. So today we are recording and it's the 28th of January. And so today was a big deal because Trump and Netanyahu got together and had a press conference at the White House, basically announcing Trump's big plan, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah, it's a really big deal. So, I mean, for decades, we've been trying to see peace happen in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Every president since Harry Truman, since Israel became a state, has tried to put forward some sort of plan to bring about peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. But, the Trump administration actually last year in 2019 released the economic portion of this plan, which is just a brilliant thing in and of itself, and that Jimmy and I discuss in depth in that white paper that you referenced on the Millennial Policy Center website. But and today he released the political part of the plan, which has some of the thornier issues and can be a lot harder to resolve, we're thinking. But really, this plan, we believe, is the most fair and generous offer ever put forward by an American administration to bring about peace between the Israelis and Palestinians. And we think, where other administrations fell short, some significant progress can be made with this plan. So.
All right, let's come back to what this plan is all about. And let's take a bigger view,
Sure.
Go up to a higher level and talk about why this is even possible at this point in time. And in reading your paper, it sounds to me like things have shifted over the last few decades as far as the Arab world and its view of Israel. And your paper talks about, everything from 1948 when Israel was first formed as its own nation, and the Arab countries, automatically went right at it and attacked it. And then it went through this mutation, basically, where all the countries, Arab countries, had what did you call it? Pan-Arabian?
Pan-Arabism.
Pan-Arabism, there you go. Where they all wanted to act together, and eventually it came to where we are now, which is that some of these other Arab countries, what you named Saudi Arabia, Oman, United Arab Emirates.
Kuwait, they're all part of, it's 6 Gulf Arab states that are part of what's called the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. So those are the ones, that we highlighted in the paper.
And they are starting to warm up. The paper said that there was a thaw, right, in relations, basically starting to warm up to the idea of trading with Israel and recognizing Israel and not insisting that they be wiped off the face of the earth anymore or go into the sea or whatever it was that they used to say.
Exactly.
Why do you think some of these Gulf countries are starting to take that attitude of more warmth towards Israel?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think, that for a really long time, as you said, they were trying to wage war against Israel. They realized really how unprofitable war was and how much it was hurting their countries. Israel's a very strong country, very strong economy, strong military. It's here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So they started to accept that more and more over time. They started to realize that, and they started to see, Israel is the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. I mean, all the innovation, all the things coming out of their country and their economy. They've always kind of wanted to benefit from that. But really the major turning point that we discuss in the paper paper, and Ambassador Sam Zakhem, who was a part of it as well, discusses, is that Iran, the regime in Iran has just been a tremendous menace and financed terrorism and caused instability all across the Middle East. And that's a whole nother thing we could get into. But in, Syria and Iraq and Lebanon, Yemen, and even within the Gulf Arab states, they're financing terrorism, trying to destabilize those governments. And Iran, as many people probably know, regularly calls for Israel's destruction. They're trying to develop nuclear weapons, and they're vowing to wipe Israel off the map. So there was kind of a convergence of strategic interest between those Arab powers and Israel. So they slowly, quietly started to develop back channel diplomatic discussions between Israel and the Gulf Arab powers. And there's really a rapprochement happening, between those countries over, say the last 10 years or so that, we think eventually will turn into normalized relations, full diplomatic relations between those countries and Israel. So it's really a unique context we're seeing right now.
So this is like a unique place in history where it's like, okay, there's an opportunity here, because all of a sudden we have a common, I'm using we as in the U.S. and Israel, and these Gulf countries have now one common enemy in Iran. And so it's like they are realizing that Iran's going to hold them back, and that is Iran's long-term goal to destabilize the whole region. I don't understand what their goal is. What do you think?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are trying to understand that as well. We're not the only ones puzzled by it, but they definitely are driven by a Shia ideology, a radical version of Islam, where they're trying to basically create an apocalyptic scenario that will eventually
bring back the 12th Imam. Is that what they're trying to do?
I mean, that's what their religion that they subscribe to teaches, their Shia version of Islam. So it very well could be. And, but even if it's just for regional domination, even just from that standpoint, I mean, you have the former Persian Empire, which was, a great empire a while ago in history that ruled over the region. And so really they're trying to control the surrounding region. They fought a war against their neighbor Iraq for many, many years, in the 80s. And now they're trying to control Iraq. They're trying to control Lebanon. They want to, destabilize Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia protects the two holiest sites of Islam. And they're kind of seen as that guardian, and they're Sunni. So there's this Sunni versus Shia, two different forms of Islam, fighting each other. So they're definitely religiously driven, but I think they're very geopolitically driven as well, and just wanting to control the region for their interests. So.
All right. So they want to control the region, and they do that in part by destabilizing the areas around them, the countries around them. That's crazy. It's just, that's why they say you can't really understand the Middle East, because,
right.
And I think too that you have to differentiate between the government of Iran and the people, because I'm guessing that most of the people have no interest in taking over the region or destabilizing all these other countries.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to do what we want to do, make a living, raise families,
Absolutely.
have a good life.
Yeah, I have many Persian friends, and most of them hate the government, and most of the Persians over there, they're protesting against this government every day, and the government has slaughtered thousands of them in the streets. They've shut off the internet so that things can't get out to the outside world as much. But we know that the regime is literally gunning down their people in the street. They're causing all kinds of economic hardship for their people by directing most of the funding toward terrorism. And, they're just, the people really are ready for a change. There's even talk of people wanting the Shah of Iran to come back as his son, So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but obviously they have a base of support within Iran, but I would say the average Iranian, most of the Persians, they don't, go along, and they're not fans of this government. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it is. It is messy over there for sure. So part of Trump's plan is to isolate Iran. I mean, I know that we pulled out of the agreement, the nuclear agreement that Obama got us into with Iran, right? And was that because we were sending them a boatload of money and getting nothing in return? I mean, what was the problem with that agreement?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, there was a number of flaws with it. It really just didn't go far enough in holding Iran accountable. There weren't enough mechanisms to really measure and be sure that they're not going to, enrich uranium beyond what they're supposed to and try to build a nuclear weapon underground. So there was that. But then one of the big issues that the Trump administration highlighted was that it didn't do anything about the instability they're causing across the region by supporting all these, Shia terrorist organizations and the financing that they're doing, and once the deal was signed and we sent them all this money and we unfroze assets, it went straight back to Hezbollah and Hamas and, the Shia militias in Iraq and all these different places to fund their operations. So it's really, but it didn't do anything to address that. So Iran was very resurgent after it and posing a much greater threat to U.S. allies, Israel, and all the Gulf Cooperation Council Arab countries we discussed earlier. So, that I think was one of the biggest reasons the Trump administration pulled out.
So we actually made them stronger when we were trying to hamstring their nuclear program. Yeah. Right. So because the way Iran operates is that they have these little proxy terrorists that go into these different countries and work as like little satellites.
Right. Yeah.
And so whenever they get money, that's what it goes to, is basically funding their proxies in these other countries?
Mostly, yeah. I mean, they divert a lot of resources to those groups. You have the Al-Quds forces, which literally means like the Jerusalem army. And eventually they want to conquer Jerusalem and Israel. That's part of their long-term goal. But the general who headed that up, Soleimani, who we took out a couple weeks ago when he was in Baghdad, he headed that up and, caused, basically was trying to overturn governments to just have people that were favorable towards Iran in those places. So yeah, they have a lot of different ways. It's very complex how they, their network of financing these different militia groups. There's Hezbollah in Lebanon, there's groups in Iraq that are Shia, there's the Houthi rebels in Yemen, there's they back the Assad government in Syria, which slaughtered over 500,000 of its people, and is also backed by Russia. And they've used chemical weapons to kill their own people. So they've definitely been supporting some bad actors and causing a lot of problems, not only for America and Israel, but for all the people that live there that that don't want to be dominated by Iran.
Right. So we took out Soleimani. Why did we do that? I read an article earlier today that said that plan was in place for 7 months, and that Trump had said that they wanted to do this 7 months ago, and he said as soon as he takes out one American life, then we'll pull the trigger on him. Right. Was this just basically a move to take out the head of the Quds force, and this was just an excuse that we had to take him out?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's always been, even the Obama administration had considered taking him out. He's always been a huge threat to the United States and to our interests. But, things had just been heightening in the region. Tensions had been heightening in the region. And, once they killed one of our contractors, and then we retaliated, and then they, stormed the embassy. It's crazy how some media outlets say it was a protest. I mean, there was clear violence against our embassy. And the statement that the Pentagon has put out is that when Soleimani came into Baghdad, when we ultimately struck him, they were planning an attack on the embassy and on attacking various places around the Middle East where the United States has embassies or where we have military bases, because ultimately their goal is to make it unbearable for the United States to be in the Middle East, and they ultimately want to push us out of the region so that they can dominate it. So he, there's no doubt he had many contingency plans to try to attack those targets. So.
Right. Well, I was just thinking strategically that these Gulf countries, GCC, are all interested in Iran being, I guess, brought to heel. And part of our plan with this peace process is to do the same thing. And so I was wondering if that was a strategic thing. It was something that Trump did to show the GCC, hey, look, we're serious about Iran. So we're proactive, we know he's done all of these things, and now we know he's planning some more things. And so, look, we're taking a hard line. And maybe I'm a little cynical, but.
No, absolutely. I think that's how the Middle East largely works is, a lot of these Arab countries, they only respect strength and determination. And that's part of why they respect this administration a lot more than they do the previous, because, not only does it align with their interests, but Trump is sticking to his policies, doing what he says he's going to do. And that's why you didn't see a huge backlash when Trump recognized Jerusalem or when he recognized the Golan Heights, because these Arab powers recognized, wow, he really means what he says. And since the last administration had really sidelined the Arabs and Israelis in the negotiations with Iran, when Trump came in and did this 180 and said, look, we're with you, Iran is a threat, and we're taking this very seriously. I agree. I think the Soleimani killing is just one more example of us showing how serious we are, how committed we are to these policies and to this, and it's really a what we call in international relations, a realist perspective of how Trump sees the world and how, and what's guiding his foreign policy. So really, the Soleimani assassination ties really well into this strategy. So.
Right. Well, that was one of the questions I had. One of my Facebook friends asked the question if part of this was that the Middle East respects strength, and they see that in Trump, which reminds me of, because you weren't around for this, but when Reagan was elected, I remember coming home and seeing the newspaper on the driveway, and it said Reagan elected and hostages freed. It was like, one headline right underneath the other. I'm like, could there be a connection between those two? Even as a kid, I saw the connection there. And so it seems like that's a big element here, is that Trump is showing strength, and that's what they respect over there.
Absolutely. And just to mention in our paper again, which your viewers can find on the Millennial Policy website under Strengthening America's Position in the World about the Middle East. So Ambassador Sam Zakhem, he's included in some of the videos that we did. And for those of your listeners who don't know, he was Ronald Reagan's ambassador to Bahrain in the late 80s. And actually, George H.W. Bush called him back during Operation Desert Storm during the first Gulf War to oversee the diplomatic affairs, because he has such close relationships with all of these Arab leaders and in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and in the UAE. And I mean, Ambassador Zakhem's written a number of books about this. And in the time I've spent with him and learning from him, and our friendship is, that is and he himself is Arab. He's a Lebanese Christian. And, the thing that I've learned so much from him is that's exactly how these countries work, is that they respect strength. They respect the determination. If you're weak in your foreign policy, you're going to be written off. They're going to try to take advantage wherever they can. But if you show your strength, even if they don't agree with your policy, they're going to respect it. Just like they didn't agree with the United States moving the embassy to Jerusalem, or with Israel annexing the Golan Heights and us recognizing that. However, they respect it now, and they've accepted it.
So those were two good tests to kind of see what's going to happen with this new plan that Trump has today put forward. And Bibi, I like to call him that because it's cute.
Yeah, it's his military name.
Yeah. No, I love his accent too. I just love Netanyahu. Like he's so charismatic, and
yes,
he's just so Israeli. I don't know. I just love him.
Absolutely.
But today at the press conference, it was interesting to watch because, of course, Trump was blowing his own horn. He's just funny. I don't have a handle on Trump. I think
he's a New Yorker, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll go the rest of my life and not know what I ever really think about Trump. Mm-hmm. But in this plan, I see that I think he's probably doing the right thing. But anyway, Netanyahu you can tell he's over the moon over this plan. Yes. And he talked about January 28th, 2020 being a new important date. What was it, like May, was it 14th of 1948? Yes. Whatever that date was when the state was created, which coincidentally enough, Pakistan was created in 1947. So it was all, it's fun. I teach a class on Pakistan, so partition is big. And that was 47. Right. So I just think about that time period over there and how interesting it must have been to be alive and living back then in that area. But anyway, Bibi was so happy about this. And Trump, of course, was thrilled about it. And so what I want to talk about next is what are the bones or the outline of this plan? And almost more importantly is whether we'll get the Palestinians on board with it, because Bibi obviously was thrilled. So obviously the Israelis are getting what they want. Right. And so I want to know what this plan is, and then obviously we're going to have to use a broad strokes on this because I think the plan is like 80 pages or something.
Right, and they just released it today, so yeah, we'll definitely be.
So I did not read the plan, no.
Right, yeah, and we'll be studying it more in length. We'll be putting work out at Millennial Policy Center about it as well as we're able to assess it more and more. But yeah, it tries to address some of the hardest political issues that have just created the stalemate for all these decades. It was strategic that they released the economic plan first last year because that's really something that everybody should be able to get behind. It will create a million new jobs for Palestinians. It'll double their GDP. It could reduce unemployment to single digits when so many are living in poverty right now. But the plan that they released today does attack head on a number of the political outstanding issues. So one of the biggest things is security, and it's going to be a very nuanced, and a lot of these things are just going to come through the negotiations between the Israelis and the Palestinians. A lot of this, what they released today, is just kind of a starting point. It's the vision, because ultimately the Israelis and the Palestinians are the ones living together. They're neighbors. We live thousands of miles away. So ultimately they're going to have to figure out specific arrangements when it gets down to the minutia of specific communities and neighborhoods and so forth, how the land, will be allocated. And so yeah, it does put forth borders. It does address security. It does give the potential for a future Palestinian state if certain milestones are met, mostly those of being security, because, unfortunately, for a very long time, Palestinian political movements have financially supported terrorism against Israelis, and they call it pay for slay. And the Taylor Force Act was introduced, I think it was last year, the previous year, to freeze U.S. aid to the Palestinian Authority until they stop funding terrorism against Israelis. So the Palestinians will have to show, that they're ready to engage in good faith negotiations and that they're ready to address Israel's security concerns. But the plan is supposed to really address those security concerns mostly, and then also give the potential parameters for a Palestinian state. And then it'll have the commercial, the economic component as well, which is extremely important to everyday Palestinians. So.
All right. So on the political side or the security side, and Bibi was saying things like they were going to take control of the Jordan Valley and Samaria and Judea. Judea, thanks. And I was thinking, I pull out my globe and I start looking at it. And first of all, Israel's tiny. it's so amazing. Right. That's such a small little tiny country.
Yeah.
In between all these other huge countries, and they're kicking butt.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's just amazing that these Gulf countries are just now starting to figure out, maybe Israel's got, an idea here of how to make things work, because they're flourishing like crazy, and they're just a little teeny tiny country.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like, well, let me just say that Bibi was thrilled, but some of the reactions, like right off the bat in this article that I got off of, how do you pronounce that? You said
Haaretz.
Yeah, that.
It means
Anyway,
the land in Hebrew. So
all right.
it's one
Oh,
of their
okay,
main.
fine.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So, and they had a map on here, and I'll link to this as well as to the MPC website with the white paper, so people can see what I'm talking about. But some
Yeah.
of the reactions right off the bat from Abbas, Mahmoud Abbas, who's
Yeah.
the Palestinian leader, right?
Right.
And then Hamas,
Right.
who's the
Right.
militant group that's in charge of Gaza, basically.
Right.
You know, they're saying things like, oh, Jerusalem is not for sale. This is what Abbas. Trump, Jerusalem is not for sale. Let's see what else. Hamas says it will confront Trump's aggressive Middle East plan. And then there was some other reaction was basically calling this apartheid. And so obviously the Israelis are thrilled. The Jordanians seem okay with this because they're one of our allies and one of the allies to Israel as well. And then the British are on board, but right off the bat, the Palestinians are no, yeah.
And it's
so just on like the political part, before we get to the financial part, what do you think are the odds that the Palestinians are going to go along with this? And I guess we will have to talk about the financial along with it, because to me, the financial is a huge carrot for them.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if the carrot will help them get there with the political part. And then I wonder, I have a lot of questions about the carrot, but do you think that the Palestinians will get there?
Yeah, I think that, it's very characteristic of the Palestinian leadership to come right out and reject the plan. That's what they've been doing for decades. I mean, Israel has said yes to peace many times when, with the Clinton administration, with Bush, with so many different administrations, Israel said yes and the Palestinians have said no. And it's really just been that simple at the end of the day. And, the government, they're ultimately afraid of losing power. The Palestinian leadership, they use most of the foreign aid that the United States and Europe sends over to them, and they just enrich the ruling class essentially, and most of it doesn't make it to the people. Over 60% of Palestinians live on less than $2 a day, yet per capita we've sent over 16 times what the Marshall Plan was, what we sent to rebuild Europe after World War II. So the Palestinians, it was kind of expected that they were going to, kind of reject it up front. I do think that it, was a little bit softer in what they were saying than what they've said in the past. And I think that the odds, yes, they are going to be steep. However, I think this is the best chance we've ever had in history for this to succeed, because of the relations developing between the Gulf Arab states and between Israel, because the Gulf Arab states are some of the main financial backers of the Palestinians. So, the Arab states may be able to bring some pressure to bear. Ultimately, they're getting tired of the Palestinians as well not making peace with Israel, and it's becoming a big nuisance for them. So as we see the Gulf Arab powers and Israel coming closer together, I think there will be more pressure brought to bear on the Palestinian regime. Ultimately, they're going to have to come forward for themselves and decide to come to the table. But, like you said, I think the financial carrot will be a critical piece of this as well, and really getting the message to the people. And I know the administration is working on that and has been working on that, engaging the Palestinian people. So instead of just the government leaders, so that they can see, the potential that this plan has. And, from interactions I've had and we've had at the center with people in the Trump administration, it's very clear that the the Palestinian millennials and others, they want peace. They just want a better life for their children, and they want healthcare. They want economic opportunity. They want all the, good things that we have over here. So yeah, I am cautiously optimistic that this could bring them to the table. So.
All right. So that takes us to the carrot part of the plan for the Palestinians. And there's a really ambitious program, $50 billion that is part of this peace plan, most of it going towards the people of Palestine, and then also there was some in Lebanon and
Jordan and Egypt.
Okay. And so
yeah,
I know it's 50 billion and it's going to be administered through a master fund. So
right.
A few questions off the bat. Number one, where is the money coming from?
Yeah, so the money's coming from a number of different sources. It's largely private capital. So they had an economic workshop in Bahrain last summer, 2019, and you had the head of the IMF, the head of the World Bank, the heads of a lot of these governments, a lot of the leading business people from Israel, from these Arab countries, and you had a lot of American executives over there as well, and CEOs. There's a lot of investment going on. So a lot of it will come from the private sector. Some of it will come from these government places as well. But it's all directed to be capital to be injected into the Palestinian economy, and it takes together, basically a bunch of different plans that have been put together over the years by the World Bank, the IMF, the US, the EU, the UN, the Quartet, all these different groups that have tried to put together different projects. It takes the best of those projects and proposals and says, let's get funding for these business opportunities and try to really improve the quality of life in these countries and create more regional integration. Like you mentioned, Lebanon and Egypt and Jordan, they're trying to bring them into the fold on this as well.
So yeah, I read through it all. Like I said, it's super ambitious, man. It's like all encompassing. It's almost like bringing this area into the 21st century, basically.
Right.
Like everything you need to bring them out of the Stone Age and into the 21st century. And obviously, the idea behind it is that if the people that live in these impoverished areas have enough investment and they have enough ownership and they have education and they have jobs or they have a business, they have healthcare, they have a path forward where they can see a bright future for themselves, then they won't want to take to the streets to fight the Israelis, or they won't turn towards terrorism because they've created a life for themselves and they've got opportunity and they see a future. And sorry, go ahead.
No, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's like Ambassador Sam Zakhem says in our video for strengthening America's position in the world, when they have something to lose, they're going to be a lot less likely to turn toward terrorism. So when, their lives are improving, they have housing, affordable healthcare, they have jobs, they have business opportunities, they have all these other things, they're going to be a lot less likely to turn to terrorism, because terrorism really thrives in environments of poverty, when Hamas and these other groups can come in and kind of brainwash the people into taking up this religious cause against Israel and the Jewish people and things like that. Their message is a lot more resonant with people who feel hopelessness or feel despair, and because of their economic situation, they feel like they're stuck. So if you can help to improve the quality of life, we really believe that their message is not going to resonate as much with the Palestinian people. When the people see, no, America and Israel really are on our side, they really do want to improve our lives, our government's been lying to us about this, then, I think there's a great chance of success here.
Right. To me, that's kind of the genius of this. I see the same thing, in the Pakistan class that I teach. One of the biggest problems that they have over there is that their education funding is so low, especially in comparison to their defense spending. But so the problem is that the kids can't get educated, and so a lot of them end up going to madrasas because that's
Right.
free. That's free education. But
Right.
of course, it's indoctrination, and some of them they're indoctrinated into this lifestyle, and they feel desperate, like there's no future for them. So yeah, they're easy pickings, to become terrorists down the line. And so I often think that with Pakistan, education it's like the hugest thing that could happen over there would make such a big difference. And so obviously it's the same thing over in Palestine, or the Palestinian area. One of the big questions I have about that, of course, though, the first thing that comes to mind is like Hunter Biden, like who's going to go over there and like really benefit from this, because in the white paper you talk about, obviously a big part of the problem with sending money over there has been that Palestinian leaders have taken it and, kept it and sent it to Switzerland and put it in their bank. And so, yeah, there's that. And then there's, a lot of times it becomes like money laundering for some of these politicians to send their family members over and make some money doing something they don't know how to do. So
Sure.
How is this going to be different? And so how is there going to be accountability so that it's going where it's supposed to go, number one? And then number two, how are you going to administer this without the cooperation of the Palestinian Authority, basically?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So the master fund, basically will, it'll work through a competitive bidding process. So, Israeli, Palestinian, American companies as well. People will be able to bid for certain contracts to do business over there. And, a big part of what they're building into all of this is an accountability piece, is, being very public about, where the contracts are going, how the money's being spent, and also creating accountability within the Palestinian government, which is something that they're obviously not too big of fans of, but it would create, they're attacking, governance issues, property rights. They're really trying to modernize a lot of these government and administrative processes to for the funding to go over there. And it's a good question exactly how it's going to happen if the government, the Palestinian government, isn't on board. But we know that the administration has been meeting with Palestinian businessmen, Israeli, American, and then also in all of these other countries. So, they're working on creative solutions for how they can deploy the capital into these different sectors and into these different places, even if it doesn't go directly through the government. And we believe that's the way that it has to be. It has to go directly to industry and not to the government. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have the same issues. So that's really the unique factor here. So.
Yeah. Well, on paper, it looks great.
Yeah.
It really does. So I'm really hopeful that this can work in some way, that these Arab Gulf countries will come in and apply pressure, and that, the stars will align, and somehow we'll be able to at least bring part of this, because the white paper, I think, ends with it, if we could get as much of this done as possible.
Right.
That, because even if you don't have to get it all done, or even like 3/4 or whatever, but if you can get a big chunk of it done, then there's a chance that this could become like this cosmopolitan area over there.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to imagine, but
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that's one of the things that former U.S. representative for international negotiations, Jason Greenblatt, who left the administration, and then also senior advisor Jared Kushner. They're really the two people that have been working on this more than anybody. What they've said is, even if we can't solve all of the political issues that that were put forth today, then at least we can hopefully improve the lives of a lot of Palestinians. So really, a lot of what they've been saying is, don't let your grandfather's conflict ruin your children's future. You have a golden opportunity here, to engage in commerce with the Israelis and America, Europe, the surrounding countries. There's really an incredible opportunity here to work together. So we're hoping that they'll take action on that. So even if not all of this can be implemented, even if only parts of this can be implemented, if we can help them to modernize their banking system, or if we can help them to, have better quality healthcare, better housing, better, transportation and infrastructure, if just certain milestones can be reached, you're going to improve a lot of people's lives and ultimately help to create more stability, discourage people away from terrorism, and better relations, create more coexistence. So we know this is going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take a lot of hard work and effort, but we really believe that this is a great opportunity, and we hope as much as possible can be implemented. But even if it's just a little bit, hopefully a lot of people's lives will be made better.
Thank you. Also, the paper points out that this is a much better option than trying to export democracy or trying to build democracies in these other countries, that, especially in the Middle East, where that's not something that they're interested in. We see that in Iraq, that's not successful. So trying to take this other tack of encouraging economic growth and economic freedom, that hopefully that success will sort of ripple out to other more democratic ways of living. So I really like the idea. It sounds like we need to educate the people in Palestine. And if we can get them on board and realize what's going on, if they can get behind it, then it could work. I think that's going to be crucial. So I hope they have
absolutely
a campaign or something.
Yeah, the education system will be critical, and the economic plan does address that. Certain reforms that will have to be made in the education system to receive certain investments, because unfortunately, right now, Hamas the Palestinian Authority controls that on the West Bank, and then Hamas in Gaza, and a lot of what is being taught to Palestinian children is to hate Israelis, to kill Jews. I mean, they're showing these awful Sesame Street type cartoons that's teaching them to hate and to murder from a very young age. So, there definitely is going to have to be a reform there. But we really believe that a lot of the millennials, a lot of the younger generations coming up are disillusioned with, this conflict and it not going anywhere, and they are looking for a better way out. But there will have to be a big education component, and the administration is working on that, and that will definitely take a lot of time. So.
Right, great. Well, we are out of time, but this has been a wonderful discussion. I am going to post the white paper, a link to the white paper on the show notes, as well as to this other article on that website I can't pronounce. And would you be willing to come back sometime in the future and tell us where this is going?
I'd love to. I'd be glad to. Thank you so much for having me on and the opportunity to talk to your listeners. I think it's such an important issue, and I think we need to reach as many people as we can, because this is going to be really good for Americans as well. So.
Great. Yes, I agree. I mean, everyone benefits from peace in the Middle East. So it's huge. It's huge. Or what does Trump would say? It's huge.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be a perfect peace plan. All right.
The ultimate deal.
Yeah, that's right. What was he calling it today? The best deal, or the
deal of the century?
I know everything's a deal.
Yeah.
It's cheesy, but hey, whatever works. If he wants to call it the deal of the century, fine.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Annette.
Come to AnnetteTalks.com and comment, and go to YouTube and subscribe and comment, and let me know what you think about the show, or today's show, any of the other episodes, or anything you want to hear about. And subscribe, like, everything else you can do on those places. So thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness.